They're hidden, huh? Well, they're very tiny.
Yes. I don't know if you know how to switch it on. That would be
I know, huh? They're just so easy to use.
So I don't know how to switch it on.
Do you have boarding pass?
Yes. I have it upstairs. I'll get it for you as soon as you, when you finish, I'll get it for you very quickly. It's lying in my office.
I can't get a mobile boarding pass for that, girl.
Okay.
You need to have the printed boarding pass.
I don't know how to, it's not, I know that doesn't, there's no switch on this one. Shaman always knows, but.
Okay, well, we're going to start with the on-time people.
That's the white Wi-Fi. No. That's the Wi-Fi thing.
Looks like you come bearing gifts.
I don't think this one goes on.
Toothpaste.
The other one is on.
This is almost maybe in the back.
No idea.
Save €5.
Trying to find somebody who knows how to work it on.
So you will remember right afterwards if I can get that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Can't get it on my phone? If I don't have that, I have to leave 45 minutes.
And you probably don't do anything if you don't know, otherwise it will not work anymore at all. Just leave it. I think it's just a matter of few buttons, but somebody will do it. Because sometimes they go to side or
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
something weird.
It's July 11th, 2019. In Radhadesh, and this is part 3 of the seminar on how to give a class. So we're going to start with the work you did yesterday. So if you can please get out your paper, because we're going to be using this extensively today. With the 2 verses on it. And the other paper you have as a reference. So if anybody could be interested to volunteer, tell me what, this is from, we're working from Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 13. And what's your principle, what's your audience, and what are you asking people to do? And I can get a glass of water.
Is the mic working?
Yes. So anybody would like to volunteer? What's your principle, who's your audience? And do you have anything to write on, anything to write with, your phone, anything? Nothing, that's, no, it's not gonna work. Do we have anything, anyone who can give this gentleman a spare piece of paper? Okay, fantastic. Writing implements. Do we have any extra handouts? You need to at least a handout of the first. Okay, and now he needs a writing implement. Does anyone have anything to write with? You have a writing implement. All right, well said, great. Anybody like to go first, please? Yes? Okay. I'll just repeat what you said. Yes, yes, please. So what is the principle?
So, the principle is the last sentence. The identity of the person. I mean, the whole topic is
Just give me your principle, please.
the identity of the person is not principle.
No, it's not a sentence.
So what is the identity of the person?
No, it has to be a declarative sentence. It has to be a sentence that has a period at the end of it. It cannot be a title or question. Does anybody want to start with their principle? Were you here before? No? Well, we need for this gentleman also a paper.
I don't have any more sheets.
Some more sheets. Share a sheet. Do you have an extra paper? Do you have an extra blank paper? Do you have an extra pen or pencil? Yes, what's your principle?
My principle is that but the devotees of the Lord.
Maya bewilders everybody, but except for the devotees of the Lord. Who is your audience?
Agnostics.
Agnostics. Whoa. Somebody likes a challenge. All right, and what is it you want your agnostics to do by the end of the class?
I want them to feel hopeful.
You want them to feel hopeful. Okay, that's good. You have can you give us a little bit more specificity there?
Yes.
We need a little bit more specificity.
So I would like them to feel hopeful about the fact that there is a Lord who is all loving, and that they will feel actually free if they connect with Him.
Okay.
that's
So if they're going to feel hopeful and free if they connect with the Lord.
Yes.
Okay, that's broad. Can we get a little bit more specificity about what are you challenging them to do for that connection?
You mean what they are going to take away?
Yes.
The applications.
Yes.
Yeah, I request them or inspire them to meditate about their such in another form.
Whoa. Okay, my reaction to that is that might be a little bit too much of a jump. She was saying that she's going to challenge them at the end to meditate on their Satchidananda form. And it just would seem to me that that's a little bit too much of a jump for an agnostic. They're starting out as an agnostic and they're going to meditate on their Satchidananda form. I mean, that would be quite a challenge if I was speaking to dedicated ISKCON devotees. Okay, right, now, when you leave this class, you can meditate on your Satchidananda form.
It all depends how you present it.
Well, that's what I'm asking you, how you're presenting it. So what are you asking them? So at the end of your class, you're going to be giving them something
Yeah.
that you're challenging them to do. So what will that be?
So my whole class is going to, I will build it up to.
Well, I know what that you're going to do, but you're going to build it up to. Can you give me a little bit more specificity? So throughout the day today, or over the next few days, or over the next week, or over the next month, you can.
How like this? Okay, I will definitely show them how to meditate, and we will do the meditation together. I will guide them.
So you can practice this meditation.
Or the next, yes.
Okay, so the meditation that we've done, so you're going to give them a specific meditation to do, and then you're going to ask them to practice it. Okay, very good. It's all right that I drilled you again?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody else, your principal, your audience, and what you're going to ask people to do. Yes.
So my audience will be a French congregation.
French congregation.
So I figured that they seem to be looking to us to find some solutions for their complicated lives.
Okay.
But they're not really ready to surrender to Krishna.
Okay.
So my principle is that Maya can bewilder everyone, but she cannot stand in front of Krishna.
Maya can bewilder everyone, but she cannot stand in front of Krishna. That's your principle. Okay. And what are you going to challenge them to do?
So I kind of basically wrote my closing statement.
That's exactly what this is.
Okay, I can just read the closing statement.
Sure, that would be lovely. Yes.
So there's hope for all of us because Krishna doesn't expect that much. He's happy with whatever little thing we do for him, and for every little step we take towards him, he will take 100 steps toward us. Of course, the bigger our steps are, the bigger these steps will be as well. But if we can start with baby steps, taking every day, do a little thing for him every day. This can be fun things. Sing the Hare Krishna mantra while you're driving in your car. Cook something nice and offer that to him. Chant one round to Ramana. Whatever it is, you will definitely feel Krishna's reciprocation, and Maya will lose a little bit of power over you.
Okay, that is excellent. I really like how Bhagavati is giving us a broad challenge, and then she's making it specific, but she's giving a range of things. So it's important that you don't want to get just one specific thing, because not everyone's going to relate to one specific thing. So if you say to everyone, okay, everybody chant one round on your mala every day, that might not be the kind of thing that everyone in your audience is going to do. So that's an excellent example. Anybody else? Anybody from this side of the room? Yes?
No, just because my idea was the same, but it has to be non-contextual. When it's a hetero...
Well, the principle is not contextual.
Yes, yeah, but this is my... because the French congregation, they all go in with their own contextual problems.
Correct.
And the main thing is still to bring a non-contextual.
Okay, well, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to go from the non-contextual to the contextual. I'm going to be taking you through the steps. But what we did yesterday, we took the verse and purport, we found from it a non-contextual, universal, one. How many principles? One. How many principles?
One.
How many?
One.
Only. And then we took from that to where we want to go with that. What do we want people to do with that universal non-contextual principle? We want them to do something. We want them, and again, that something might be a mood. I mean, what you might also say to agnostics is maybe throughout the day today, over the next 3 days, maybe over the next week, we can sometimes be curious. Because agnostics pride themselves on being open. So we could sometimes be curious. Could there be? Is there evidence for? If there was evidence for a personal intelligence, would finding that personal intelligence make my life easier? Can we have that curious thought? Maybe once a day, 3 times a day, to have that curious thought. And those of you who want to take it further and really explore, go from the curiosity to an experiment, you could try this meditation. And I like to shy away from giving people one thing to do, because it will bring out rebellion in some people that don't like that. Anybody else want to bring up their one principle, their audience, and the thing they're asking people to do? Yes?
It's not very well developed, but my audience is, I guess, devotees, just practicing devotees.
Okay.
They're the easiest.
Practicing devotee. Well, sometimes they're the hardest. Depends on what you're.
That is true.
It depends on what it is you're challenging them to do.
But my general principle is that the material energy of Krishna is a personality.
Well, I'm repeating this for the recording. That the material energy of Krishna is a personality. That's your principle.
And not sure exactly how to conclude it, but I guess how to see that personality in our daily life, or look for that personality in our daily life.
Okay, so look for the personality of Maya in our daily life. And what you might want to come up with is give people some ideas as to how they could do it specifically. Not that you're saying they have to do it like this. But what could be a way, what could be a very specific way that I could look for the personality of Maya? I mean, I've got a few more hours in my day today. What could I do?
Well, what kind of gave me this idea was of a story of the Srila Prabhupada once saw a bird building a nest in the wall right outside his room. You know that story?
Yes.
And it was kind of making a disturbance. So the bird would start to build a nest, and then he asked his servant, fill up the hole, plug up the hole.
Yes.
So the bird came back bewildered, oh, the hole's filled up, and he worked and worked, pulled out stuff in the hole, and went away and began to build a nest again. And then he came back and again began to build a nest. And then when he flew away, they pulled out everything, and this time they really plugged up the hole. So the bird was trying again and again and again, but he couldn't get it out. Finally, he flew away. And when Prabhupada says, this is like us, or like the materialists, that we have all of our plans and we're working, but we don't realize there's someone watching us. In other words, it's not just mechanical laws of material nature.
But I'm still wondering, okay, so I'm going to teach this class until 7.
I told you it's not fully developed.
And
It's
then
just
I'm trying to get you to fully develop it right now. All right, and then, so between 7 and 8, I'm going to do laundry, and I'm going to trying to finish answering my email. I'm going to chant my Gayatri, have some fruit, put my deities to bed, get ready for bed. Where in there, could I relate to Maya as a person. So that's what you want to think about, because if I'm going to relate to Maya as a person, if I can get some, it doesn't have to be what I'm necessarily going to do, but some idea of what I'm going to do. So maybe the next time my plans get thwarted, I could think about, all right, Maya, okay. I know you're behind this, and I know you're Krishna's agent, and so you must be thwarting my plans for some higher purpose. Could that be it?
Yeah. Well, another thing comes to mind is that I would say Maya is always trying to check the hearing process. Probably, I would say that, so we can. Yeah, it's interesting. So, like, in other words, it just brings some personality into it.
But again, I want to know how. So when you say Maya's trying to check the hearing process, could that mean, so when I'm going to sit down and chant my Gayatri tonight, or when I'm going to start chanting my rounds tomorrow, and my mind starts going somewhere, could I think, oh, there's a person there who's testing me and trying to check how absorbed I am,
How serious I am.
how serious I am.
I mean, ultimately it means surrendering to Krishna.
And that person is ultimately benevolent because she's Krishna's servant.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two examples that I just gave. So again, you might not ask people to specifically do that, but you could give that to people as an example of how they could relate to Maya as a person. You want to give people something that they can specifically do. Again, the doing may not be a physical action. Here we're talking about a mental action.
Just in this connection, I was thinking about reading step one. If Maya came to him as a person, and then he was chanting, and then she
got purified. So I could try to purify Maya Devi. Like part of this
So I was
stuff.
thinking of
Don't
sometimes
do
we
this at
chant.
home.
I don't try this at all. But that's actually kind of an interesting idea.
That's a
Because-
nice example.
Because Maya Devi is also called Vaishnavi.
Yeah.
So if I'm imagining or picturing that when my mind wanders during japa or gayatri or reading or whatever, that it's actually a person there trying to distract me, like the person was trying to distract Haridas Thakur. And instead I say to her, why don't you join me in my chanting? You're Vaishnavi, why don't you join me in my hearing? Why don't I chant to you, Maya Devi? That's actually an interesting idea. I think I'm going to try it myself. Thank you. So,
I just was intrigued by the idea. I didn't explore it well enough yet.
well, but that's what we're here to do. So I think we've explored already 3 things that we could do to see Maya Devi as a person. And this would be something that before you actually give a class, you want to explore it so that people have, again, something that they could do. Yes?
Before we move on, could you give us a few mental and emotional actions?
Well, what we just talked about seeing Maya as a person is a mental and emotional action.
Mental
You know, if I'm trying to chant in the kirtan and my mind goes to, oh my goodness, did I pack that thing? I have my flight in an hour. And I can say, oh, hi, Maya Devi. Nice to see you. Can you join me in the kirtan? That's a mental action.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a mental action. An emotional action, like, would be related to this that I can think of right now. Okay. Bewildered persons is that they talk nonsense. So let's say we took the principle that talking nonsense is a symptom of bewilderment. Oh, I know exactly how I would start that class, which I might definitely teach you tonight how to start a class. Oh, I have a great story for that one. But we all find ourselves sometimes talking just completely useless nonsense things, don't we? Right? Am I the only one in this room who does that? And we're often aware of it as soon as we start talking nonsense. Aren't we? You know, we're not, well, I shouldn't be saying this. It's just gossip, or it's just useless, or it's a waste of time, or it's self-centered. Or yes? Yes? Do we have a little, like, alarm that goes off? I hope so. It says, or if maybe not us, maybe we have a good friend we're talking to who kind of looks bored. And then it can be emotional. Oh, that's just bewilderment. And just laughing at it. Or if someone else talks nonsense, it happened to me, in fact, yesterday. Somebody called me up to interview me, and the person asked completely nonsensical questions. Just completely. And it was obvious that the person who was interviewing me had not done any research as to me. They had no idea who they were interviewing. And my emotions were irritation. And I said, look, have you even looked at my biography? Let me send you my biography. But the emotion was feeling just irritation. Like, why is this person wasting my time asking me questions that you could figure out in 2 minutes by looking at my biography and my website? So as I was coming here, I saw Anasuya and I said, it's really irritating. And she said, why don't you laugh instead of being irritated? And I'm like, that's a really good idea. And I just started laughing because the whole thing was so absurd. So can we change our irritation to laughter? Can we change our guilt to gratitude? That's a really good one, changing guilt to gratitude. I'm so low, but Krishna is still engaging me in his service. So that's an emotional action. It's not really an intellectual action. I mean, there's some intelligence involved, of course, in just laughing instead of being irritated, or feeling gratitude instead of just feeling guilty, but it's primarily an emotional switch. Or for an agnostic, I really like Advaita Ras. So can we get some feeling of wonderment at the creation? Okay, I want to go through the steps as to how we go from how many principles per class?
1.
Thank you. How we go from our 1 principle to our conclusion, what we end the class with, where I'm challenging, suggesting, inspiring people to actually do something. That I'm taking it from this big, non-contextual, universal principle all the way down to the specific context of my specific audience. So as I said yesterday, first we have to get our audience to agree with the non-contextual universal principle. And that's not as much of a challenge as personalizing it. The next thing we have to do is much more challenging, to get people to agree that this universal non-contextual principle applies to them in their context, which is a lot harder. But once people have agreed that the universal principle is true, they're almost to have to agree that it's true for them. So if you do a really good job of convincing people that something is universally true, if it's universally true and I believe that, then I sort of kind of almost have to accept that something that's true for everybody is true for me. Okay? So how are we going to do that? And there's a number of different ways, but I'm going to teach you tonight the easiest way, simplest way. And it's a way that's so easy and so simple that once you become expert at it, you can really do it in 30 seconds. And that is, you divide this big universal principle into 3 subcategories. Also, doing this keeps you from wandering all over the universe. It forces you to be organized. It takes your audience also in a way that they can organize it. It's kind of like having chapters in a book or subheadings in an essay. And because most of you got my notes for this, you have it there, but you also even have it on this sheet. Okay, where we have, here I'm calling it the theme up into 3 parts. So here we have a list of the different ways it can be done. Spatial, this is under content. Spatial, chronological, parallel, cause-effect solution or effect-cause solution, principle, general application, personal application, and others. But what we're doing here is we're going to take the general application and break it up into 3 parts. You can also have the first two parts for general and the third part for personal. Or in each part, you can go from general to personal. I know I'm going quickly. I hope you're following that. I'm going to repeat that. You can have parts 1 and 2 general, parts 3 personal, or in each of your 3 parts, you could first establish general and then personal. General, personal, general, personal. Okay, so I'm going to take this principle about talking nonsense because I thought of a great introduction, so that's going to be really easy for me to model. So if I take a principle that talking nonsense is a symptom of being bewildered by Maya. It's one of the ways you can tell if someone's bewildered by Maya is they talk nonsense. So let's say I'm going to take parallel areas. I'm going to divide this principle up, this universal principle. Is that a universal principle? Is that pretty much always true when people are bewildered by Maya? It's evident in their speech. There's some evidence in their speech. So parallel areas. We could talk about what is the nature of Maya, what is the nature of speech. What else can we do? What is the nature of Maya? What is the nature of speech? We probably have to do another one. What is the nature of reality? Okay, so what's the nature of reality? What's the nature of illusion? And what's the nature of speech? So this could be 3 parallel areas that I could use to establish that there's a relationship between whether you're in the truth or illusion and sound.
So that'd be the 3 parts.
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, it's one.
It could. That's one possibility.
Yeah.
Would you like to repeat?
We could do speech in bhakti, speech in impersonalism, and speech in the modes. That could be another 3 parallel ones. We could do speech in each of the modes. That would be pretty easy. We could pull that right out of the Bhagavad Gita. All right, let's look at chronological. Now that's really interesting. If we wanted to do this chronologically, I would probably go to the creation of the universe, how the universe was created with transcendent sound that gradually dissolves into material sound. So I'd probably talk about the big creation, the creation of earth, water, fire, air, ether, the sub-creation of the universe where Brahma creates everything through his sounds, and then the creation in our lives and how we choose to speak creates our own life. So that would be chronological, the big creation, the smaller creation. We could also do chronological in terms of a person's life, how we speak something, and from that speaking something, there's a particular result. How would we do it in 3 parts? We'd probably have to come from first the state of mind, whether one's in Krishna or in Krishna consciousness or in Maya, then how one speaks in that consciousness, and then what's the result of that speaking. So that would be chronological. Spatial would be in different places. So we could be, how do the residents of the spiritual world speak? How do the demigods speak? How do the humans speak? Or we could do demigods, humans, and animals. So we could do spatial. Then we have cause, effect, and solution. So this is a cause, effect, and solution is a really easy way to get from general application to personal application. That the cause of our bewilderment is ultimately the misuse of our transcendent voice. The effect is our entanglement. The solution is spiritual sound. We could have the desire to lord it over material nature. has the cause, the effect being bewilderment, another effect being nonsense talk, and then the solution being to change into transcendent sound. And you can put those in different orders. I sometimes move around the cause and effect. So sometimes it's a good idea to give the problem first, and then the reason for the problem, and then the solution. So we could start with, isn't there a problem with all the time and energy we waste by hearing and speaking about things that are useless or harmful? We could describe the difficulty, how much difficulty there is, the newspapers, the magazines, the movies, the music, our gossip and criticizing and ISKCON and all this difficulty, and that would be the effect. And you get people kind of to feel that well, what's the cause? The cause of that is bewilderment by Maya. And to explain that, how is Maya bewildering and what's the solution? The solution is through transcendent sound to get rid of the bewilderment of Maya. So it's a very simple thing. Oh, you can also do chronological, like in terms of just normal past, present, and future. Nonsense talk in the past. Are there examples of nonsense talk even in the scriptures? Are there examples of nonsense talk in our scriptures?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you give me some examples?
When Kalyavana was speaking to Krishna.
Okay, Kalyavana to Krishna. Excellent. Pondraka. Woohoo! The messenger Pondraka sent. Excellent. Shishupal. I was thinking of Pururava and Urvasi and Agnidra and what was her name? Purvachiti. Agnidra and Purvachiti is a really good example because he thought that she was a brahmachari. And so he's just talking about this ridiculous talk.
Diti, she was speaking about that.
Oh, Diti was trying to bewilder Kasyapa. Okay, so we could talk about nonsense talk in the past. And then we could talk about nonsense talk in the present. All of the talk shows on the radio and television, which are probably 99.9% just utter rubbish. The celebrity gossip columns, right? The movies, the novels. I mean, just think of how much nonsense talk there is in the world, and then how much nonsense talk we do, and then in the future, how is Kali Yuga going to progress? So we could do it chronologically like that, in the past, the present, and the future. Okay. Then, why don't we'll do this step. Take your principle and think of 3 areas. They can be parallel, cause, effect, solution, effect, cause, solution, chronological, spatial. All you want now is a little title, like 3-4 words to list what would be your 3 areas. Do you have the verse that we're working from? You didn't bring it? If people could share, if you have an extra copy of the
I
verse.
have a few more of those.
We have a couple more, so can we pass those out to people?
This is 2 or 3.
That's all. We're working from 2-5. Okay, we're working from 2-5-13 Bhakti. So again, this is with the principle you're using and with your idea of bringing people to what you want them to do. So get your 3 areas with that in mind. You want to keep in mind that your 3 areas are bringing them from your universal principle to what you want them to do. Anybody feel they're ready to share? Yes, Angela. What's your principle?
Taking shelter of Krishna helps free us from suffering.
Taking shelter of Krishna helps free us from suffering, and your 3 areas?
3 types of suffering were parallel. The suffering of a general materialist, the suffering of an impersonalist like a brown body, and the suffering of a devotee.
The suffering of a devotee. Wow. Okay, thank you. Excellent. And what is it you want to get people to do?
Chant, like to regularly engage with chanting, whether it's particular rounds or whether it's singing or something like that, but to take more shelter of the whole meaning.
Okay, it'd be good again if you had a little bit more specificity there. If you have some ideas about 2 or 3 suggestions as to how they can increase
Well,
their
I
shelter.
have
You do.
some, to chant more regularly, to chant more attentively, to chant a regular number of rounds, whatever that is, like that.
Okay, very nice. Anybody else like to volunteer? Yes, what is your principle?
A person who considers himself to be the body is in ignorance.
A person who considers himself to be the body is in ignorance. And what are your 3 areas?
The cause, effect, and solution.
Okay.
So the cause, bodily consciousness, makes us think that this is I and this is mine. And the effect is that this makes us see as different from each other.
Okay.
And the solution would be to see the permanence of consciousness, that the bodies are temporary and actually the soul is.
Excellent. And what is it you want people to do?
To think about the permanence of that we don't change, the body changes.
Okay. Do you have anything a little bit specific that you'd like them to do? Okay. So remember that if we're not sure what we want our audience to do, they're not going to be sure either. So the more clarity that we can have, the more clarity the people who are hearing us will have. So how could we do? What could we do to focus on the permanence? I mean, a very simple thing. I did it today. You know, I was walking today and I thought, that tree is standing there, no matter how the clouds are moving, you know, it's raining, it's sunny, it's raining, it's sunny. Yesterday it was raining and sunny, and cloudy and sunny, but the tree is still there throughout all of these changes. And the same way, you know, I am still the same person, even though there are so many changes that goes on and on. So we can have things in nature remind us of that. But that's just one example, but you might think of some others. Anybody else? Yes?
So the principle, Maya bewilders all, except the devotees.
Maya bewilders all except the devotees, yes?
Yes, and then cause-effect solution would be to explain what misidentification means, and then that based on that comes bewilderment, and then what would be the solution is clear.
Okay.
Come back into the right identity, and then have it as.
Okay, very nice.
I didn't really catch that.
Oh, could you maybe say it a little? So, could you just say it a little louder because I didn't repeat it?
Yes. So, cause would be to explain what misidentification means, and then the effect is bewilderment, which is clear, and the solution would be to explain to them what the right identification is. And then
So,
give a meditation.
misidentification, bewilderment, correct identification. Yes. Okay.
So you had the same principle as before?
Yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
agnostics, trying to get them to think about the eternal.
The same principle, yeah, same principle, same conclusion she mentioned before.
Okay.
All right. Then the last thing you do when planning what you're going to say, but the first thing you actually do when you're speaking is your introduction. And the first few seconds of a speech is really when you're going to get people's attention. Now, in that sense, we're a little bit at a disadvantage in the fact that we always begin our classes at Shastra with reading the verse and reading the purport. And often when we do that, I have to say, we do it in such a way that people don't tend to be particularly attentive. Illusory energy of the Lord cannot take precedence, being ashamed of your position, but those who are bewildered by your story of nonsense Things, organ, thoughts, of the design is my purport. The invincibly powerful tool, and nobody remembers a word you said. Now, in some temples, they have a screen up and people are following on the screen, and in some temples I go to now, everybody has the verse on their phone, which is always makes me wonder what they're really looking at on their phone. You know, and so sometimes people are following along in that way, but I have experienced over and over and over and over again that even after a short purport, if I ask people what was said, I get this deer in the headlights gaze. One tact that some people take is, and I'll do this especially with very long or very complex or very philosophical purports, is they'll stop in the purport, and Srila Prabhupada sometimes does this also. He's giving a class. They'll stop partially through the purport and discuss something and go on and discuss it and go on and discuss it. Another thing I sometimes do is I actually give out my introduction before I read the translation. Sometimes I'll even give my introduction before I recite the Sanskrit. And I'll particularly do that if the Sanskrit words are there's a lot of very commonly used Sanskrit words that I'm assuming a lot of the people in the audience have some familiarity with. So I might sometimes put out an introduction before the Sanskrit or before the translation. Otherwise, you're in a position where you're really not giving your introduction until after the purport. So if you're not going to give your introduction until after the purport, especially in a case like that, you want to make sure that you're reading the verse and the purport with a little expression, you know, with some attention to the fact that probably, I'm assuming at least, that the translation and the purport are the most important part of my class. That whatever I have to say is going to be far less than what Sukadeva Goswami and Narayana and Srila Prabhupada are saying. And so that should be the main thing I'm focusing on. I did a few times give a class where we really just work with the verse and purport. That's a highly advanced technique, something I learned from Krishna Dharma and Chintamani Dhamma. And if we had a week to do this, I would teach you that. But keep in mind that whatever you do to start your class is crucial. At least the start of your own speech. It's absolutely crucial. It's what's going to capture people's attention. I should also say we have a big problem in ISKCON that people come late to class. One of my most frustrating things as a trained speaker is that people come late. Well, first of all, they figure the Jayarada Madhava is optional. You know, any kirtan is optional, probably the verse is optional, whatever. And, you know, there's people wandering in at all sorts of times, and it's quite frequent that people are wandering in after the introduction. I mean, it happens a lot, especially if I decide to do the introduction before the Sanskrit or do the introduction before the translation, then I'm sure I've lost 50 to 75% of my audience. And it's quite frustrating because the introduction is what sets the whole tone and mood for the whole class. And it's what's capturing people. I mean, it's interesting, Lord Kapila says that our meditation should capture the Lord like a fish is captured with a hook. And your introduction is your hook for your audience. If you lose people at your introduction, you've got to work extremely, extremely hard to get them back in. So really, first of all, absolutely no apologies. No, I'm such a fallen soul, I shouldn't be here, I don't know what I'm doing, I didn't prepare for the class, I don't know anything. And it's like, well, please get off of the Yasasana and go someplace else. So please don't apologize. But even just the, well, I'm so glad to be here, it's nice to see all of you, you know, do that at the end, not at the beginning. So what you want at the beginning for your introduction is you want an interesting story, or a question that people are not going to know the answer to, that they have to listen to your class to know the answer to, or some really fascinating fact. I'm going to try one of those three. Now, if you have, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes for a class, you could spend up to 5 minutes on an introduction. Up to 5 minutes on an introduction.
I miss your third point. You talked about
An interesting story,
questions
a question that people probably don't know the answer to, that they figure they have to hear your class to know the answer to, or some kind of interesting fact.
Interesting.
Now, if you can tie your introduction into the felt needs of your audience that you're going to solve in your class, that's great. But it's not necessary. You simply are establishing rapport and getting people's attention. That's all you're doing. You're establishing rapport with the audience and you're getting people's attention. You're getting it so people want to hear what you have to say. Again, ideally, the introduction brings out people's felt need, but you can do that in the first area if you want. So the introduction that I thought of for this principle of bewildered people talk nonsense is how, bless you, is how we always had a policy of taking our children to Bhagavatam class. And so our children were regularly hearing when they went to Bhagavatam class. I mean, from a very young age, we're talking like 1, 2 years old, they were going to Bhagavatam class. And they're often hearing in Bhagavatam class about talking nonsense, because Prabhupada talks a lot about talking nonsense. And our kids also listen to Prabhupada's lectures regularly. And so they often heard Prabhupada speaking about talking nonsense. And one time I was out and about in New York with my son, who was then about 3 years old, and he runs up to me and he says, "Mata, Mata, those people over there are talking nonsense." And I walked over to them and they were speaking Spanish. And I realized that for this 3-year-old, he'd been hearing in the classes all the time and probably always wondering, what does that mean, talking nonsense? And he was so excited to finally find people who he thought were talking nonsense. Okay? So it's an interesting story. It's engaging, yes? And what does an interesting story do? Did you notice it lowered your defenses? Did y'all notice that? That's what stories do. We take our ego defenses because, you know, although we come to Shastra classes to be inspired, and we come to Shastra classes to get understanding, and we come to Shastra to get classes to get practical application and to be enlivened with Leela, at the same time, if we are conditioned souls, anybody here going to say they're not a conditioned soul? If we're a conditioned soul, we have this thing called ahankara, we have this thing called false ego. And we're constantly on alert that somebody's going to damage it. You know, ostensibly we come to Krishna consciousness to get rid of it. We're like, here I am in the Hare Krishna movement to get rid of my false ego. Okay, can I knock a chip out of it? No. So we have this constant antenna out. Is anybody going to dismantle my false ego? And even when we come to a Shastra class, we have this kind of wariness. Right? Like you said, we want to also be entertained. You know, so we have this kind of wariness that, well, I'll be entertained. I'll agree to be entertained, but I'm not going to agree to be changed. You know, I'm not going to agree to have somebody really get down under that false ego and knock out a piece of it. So we should assume that our audience generally has some level of defense up. Generally. Unless we've been doing like a multi-part class, we've been working with the same audience over days or weeks, and we've really established a deep trust. We should assume that. So part of the idea of an introduction is just to have people lower their defenses, just to get some kind of a rapport. That it's okay, we're friends. You know, and definitely humor does that. Sometimes you can start off with a story about yourself. It's okay to make fun of yourself, by the way. That also helps people lower their defenses. If you can admit some fault in yourself. Like I know Satchidananda Maharaj often does that in his books and in his lectures. So that's the kind of thing that also kind of opens people up. So that's your purpose of your introduction, again, is to establish rapport, is to get people to be attentive, and if possible to get people to kind of, at least ever so slightly, feel that they're going to have some receptivity, that it's okay, that you're going to be on their side, you're not going to hurt them, you know, you're actually their well-wisher, that kind of rapport, because it's kind of an underlying fear that we have. Yes?
Just to support your point, there's also some research out there I don't remember the exact number of seconds, but when somebody comes to speak before us, it takes us maybe 7 seconds or 10 seconds subconsciously that we are judging the person
Yes.
and deciding if we like the person or not. It may be the glasses, it may
Yes.
be anything about the person, but we are not aware of it, and it sets our mood, and we're going to follow
Yes.
or not.
Well, this is one reason why I explained the first day about introductions, that the purpose of an introduction is also to kind of establish this rapport and trust. But so some of it is even when you're singing Jai Radhamadava, when you're saying the verse, how are you sitting, what gestures are you having, how are you relating? Yes, that is definitely there. So the introduction, in one sense, is the least important part of your lecture. In fact, it could be that introduction was really just fluff, wasn't it? That I just gave, right? It was just fluff. It didn't have any substantial content in terms of the relationship between bewilderment and talking nonsense, did it? Do you understand?
Was it talking nonsense?
No, of course not. But it wasn't anything substantial. So your introduction doesn't need to be something that's majorly substantial. So in one sense, you could say it's the least important part of your talk. But on the other hand, it's your way to get in. You know, if you're distributing books door to door, people have to answer the door. They have to open the door. Or, you know, when we distribute books on the street, someone has to stop. Just getting someone to stop. You know, 200 people can go by and you don't get someone to stop. And whatever you use to get people to stop is probably not your pitch.
Yeah.
So you can say,
It's nonsense.
you can say that it's the least important part of your lecture. At the same time, you can say it's the most important part, because it's what's going to get you in. Now, the perfect speech has an introduction that is substantial, that surfaces people's felt need, and that you get back to in your conclusion. That's the perfect intro, I must say. That's like, you know, hitting a home run in the ballpark. And I mean, in my own classes, I'm doing that once, maybe every 50 or 60 classes, where I really get an intro that's surfacing the felt need and that I circle back to at the end. Sometimes you can get an intro that you refer to throughout the class and you circle back to at the end, and you get an intro that really sets the theme for the class. You know, when you do that, it's like, woo! You know, it's just like, that's perfection. But it's not necessary to do that in every class. You don't have to aim that high, because that takes often a lot of preparation and a lot of time to get to the point that one can do that. All right, so now we only have a few minutes, so I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do. So if I was going to run through this, so I tell that story of how my son came up to me and said people were talking nonsense, and I noticed that they were talking Spanish, and let's say I was going to do the chronological, and I would say, although my son didn't understand what nonsense talking really is, nonsense talk has been a problem practically since the beginning of the creation. I mean, here we find Daksha at the beginning of the creation, criticizing Lord Shiva, right? And I might go down the different examples in the Shastra. I might ask the audience for some examples. And then we could say, and nowadays, it's hard to find anybody who's not talking nonsense. You know, turn on the radio, turn on your phone, get on the internet, check the news. It's pretty much all rubbish. It's all about the nonsense activities. And so I go into that, and then we could talk about how there's so much nonsense talk in ISKCON. And then we could say, what's the future going to hold? You know, what are we going to do? Plant chips in people's brains and then they can communicate their nonsense thoughts to each other? Just imagine that. Imagine if every nonsense thing you thought were known to all the people around you. Oh my goodness, you know, we wouldn't have a moment of peace. So what are we going to do? Not only has all of our bewilderment caused us nonsense talk, but our nonsense talk gives us fear, anxiety, wastes our time, pulls us away from Krishna. So what am I doing now? I'm taking it from the universal principles to personalizing. Now as I'm saying this, are you feeling it? Are you feeling it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I did this very fast. Yes?
Yeah.
Very fast. I ran over the speech, but you're still feeling it. You've got to get people to feel it. When you take it to the personalized level, they've got to feel it. What does Prabhupada say? Thinking, feeling, willing. You're doing this progression that people agree intellectually. Oh yeah, that's true. Oh, it's true for me. Let me do something. If you don't get the emotional involvement, you will not get a commitment to action. And it's not hard. How long did I take to get some emotional involvement from everybody in this room? A minute? 2 minutes? It wasn't long, was it? Yeah? And how we feel at the end of the day, when I think, oh, wow, did I say that? Oh, why did I say that? Oh, no. Did I put that in an email? Did I post that? Can I delete it? Delete. Oh, no, I can only delete it for me now. It's already gone out. Well, and I said that thing and I told her to keep it confidential, but probably not going to. Oh no, it's going to get to my other friend. What do people think? So what are we going to do? Well, if we look at the austerities of speech, we find the most important is beneficial. To think with my speech in terms of service. How am I helping myself and others who want myself? And what I hear. It may be true, I'm not even always sure if it's true. Well, I heard it from someone I don't know, it might be true. But at least the mood of service. I don't know if we can get rid of all of our nonsense talk in the next 24 hours or the next 3 days. But if we can maybe resolve, at least periodically during the day, to say, is this really helping me? Is it really helping other people? Is it going to be something that Krishna is going to smile at? Or is it something that Maya is going to smile at? Which person do I want to make smile today in the way I talk? Okay? Did I give a specific, right? And I could even circle back and then say, and whether you speak English or Spanish or Croatian or French or Dutch, then nothing you say will be nonsense. Okay? So that's the order. Intro, your 3 areas, and then personalizing. Now you might have personalized it all the way through in each of your areas, but at least at the end we want to personalize, and then we want to ask for some kind of action. I often find it better to ask for action in terms of we and not you. Because again, when you're asking for action, you're asking people to do something to cut out their false ego. And I find if I do it as you, it's like, well, people are going to look at me and say, well, who are you? That if I do it as we, that people are more, okay, we can do this together. Yes.
Is this good then, Prabhupada, always write we?
Generally.
Generally.
Sometimes I find myself falling into you, but I try to correct myself very quickly and take it to we. I hope you have found this helpful. What I suggest you can do as a practice is take the second quote we have here, which is Canto 1, 3:17, and just as a practice run, without writing out a whole speech, just simply isolate principles, try to get at least 3 principles, decide on your audience, pick 1 principle, decide on what change you would ask, pick the 3 areas, and pick an introduction. So just as a practice run, it would probably take you about a half an hour. Okay, and like any other skill, the more you practice, the better you get. Now, if what you can do, any of you, like if you live in Radhadesh, there's other people here in Radhadesh, if you want to, over the next week or so, get a partner who's also been in this class and show each other and have each other check what you're doing, that would be most helpful. Okay? Maybe next time. I thought we were doing advanced things this class. We didn't get that far. Maybe we'll plan that for another visit. Thank you very much. Anything here you didn't find helpful, feel free to throw in the trash, and anything that you can use, I hope you can use into your relevant service.
Yes, we it's better when we are peaceful apart rather than when we are right now all together here.
Does anybody know how to play mridanga? Mata
Probably like more sound. More sound.
You have not this? Like this?
No.
Only one.
Yes, but I have to read this. I don't have my glasses on. I'll move from the front. I'll move to the outside. Very good.
Radhadesh.
Radha
Just because your heart is maybe I need to
Eso voy a hacer.
I don't want to be later.
Por eso.
Hare Krishna. Can you close the door?
Today is Thursday, Krishna is Thursday. Yeah, like this. Oh, I'm waiting to see. And if you have a night flowers, I go to eat prasad. Go. You want to eat something good?
I'm full. Do you want?
No.
I was thinking, how did you...
That is gorgeous. Yeah, I actually wanted to tell you that they didn't take the mala which you made.
What is called?
Oh, really? Mine is the mala which she made.
Oh, Jaipur,
Did you?
I made it with a little help of Mataji, of course. I didn't do it alone. She helped me a lot with making it and her long, but together it became beautiful. She didn't take the mala. Why not? Because it's beautiful.
I wanted you to be with him. He said you took it from me, so now I'm going to take it.
But tomorrow Maharaj will have it on him. Fly into the water too.
You play kartal? This is the best kartal in the whole thing. This kartal is the best among all of them.
Yeah?
I just realized yesterday when I was reading for Radha Mataji. Look at the sound.
But I'll play just when it is...
It's really nice. Yes, this one is really nice.
Everything else is very harsh.
Yeah.
It's not tuned properly. This is tuned. You can tell when you hear it.
Is this from class?
No.
Isn't there now...
But I'll play just when that beat is
When is it going to be Prashada? Prashada is not now.
No.
After. Good.
Now it's Prashada.
Yeah, after.
But it will be gone if you want to have it.
No, I just said because like you'll tend to forget it.
Oh, so are we going down for 10 minutes?
No.
We're gonna do a little bit. Mata, I was saying to you, you need to do easy tunes. Because if we don't...
That one is easy, but the 3 were...
No, last time she was doing a really difficult one. I couldn't tap into it.
Which tune was I doing?
That's when I went away to get prashadam. She was also not here. And there was another girl. He knew it was ridiculous. Oh.
Oh, like if you don't get that,
Hare Krishna.
if you don't get, please don't do Radha.
No?
You're going to hurt your fingers more.
Oh. Maybe soft. No, okay.
No. You want to make it worse for tomorrow, maybe the parents will be more upset and they see it very bad.
Yeah. Sorry, Balaji, Kshama.
These are much easier to hold than mine.
Guess this tune and doesn't, okay?
Like you were doing the first tune. That was really nice. The first time we were together. We 3 of us. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Did you
That
give
one-
me
The same one that guy was singing after you.
Yes, the bit that you gave me. Sing it one time. I don't know how much.
Yes. Yeah, that one.
Do you need one more? No, I have it. Yes, that one.
Is it this one? Is that one?
Oh, there's something in Govinda Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajam.
Govinda Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govinda Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govinda Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govinda Adi.
We're supposed to sing it in English.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
It's only for mantra.
Really? I sing it throughout the day whenever I feel like it. Krishna.
Yeah, we have to learn somehow, right?
Come do it yourself.
I don't know why I'm not walking, but yes, let's do the Hare Krishna because we don't have much time before the others come. At least they can join, but I don't think they want to sing other kirtan. Oh yes, they were saying. What was the tune? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. The first one that we were doing together, but maybe has.
No, I thought this is the one that said it used to be one. We start the one that we want.
Yeah, let's start with this. We are not practicing, we're singing for the deities. It's difficult. I think it's difficult for Mataji to tap in the tune. Am I wrong? because she's not singing.
Yeah, for me, I cannot sing that.
Yeah, so please, maybe the first one, so we can all sing together in this kirtan. We are not practicing that. We can maybe practice this outside the temple, because I think.
No, I think she's having kirtan.
You don't want to sing?
No, I would like to, but she's leading kirtan, so she wants to sing. But she feels that she wants to sing.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Okay, is that
But
what
I don't know.
No, you don't want to.
I would like to, but she's.
Just to make another point, because we're all here for the kirtan course, getting to know each other. Do you maybe want to try it? Hare Krishna. Sing
Yeah,
it.
without this.
Yes, maybe without music. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
That's what we want. Let's get it. That's what we want there.
Where?
Outside the
Outside. Maybe. See, I have difficulties getting in the tune as well.
You can't reach. It's fine. I'll.
Don't you remember the song, the type you gave to me?
That's
That's not your mood. That's not your mood.
No, I like to sing different for the daily every day.
But you know what Janani Mata said? When you're doing kirtan, it's not for yourself, it's for the rest. Just, it's not my words. It's just because I see Mata and she's like, I think she wants to burst out, but she cannot. She's like,
Can you just not play kartal?
Yeah,
Because it's just stressing you out.
Yeah.
And I can feel it from here. Okay?
It's not stressing.
I actually felt it too, a little bit, but
No, but it's because like, you know, when you're in a kirtan, you need to sing along. Even if there's no instrument,